What's up, gang? It's Articulate, and let me tell you, it's been a rough couple of weeks here. Not really, it's been amazing, but with recording and figuring out a lot going on with the podcast and everything, things that you guys don't care about, honestly. But I did want to do a check-in episode because it's been a while, and I have had a lot of thoughts over the past couple of months, which is interesting because it started out by not having thoughts at all. You ever get really happy and then don't think about anything ever? Life is weird that way. So it's been interesting because I have really been the happiest that I've been in my entire life for the past 3 months now at this point. Like, there are not, I've always experienced anxiety and depression my entire life. If you've been following the podcast, you know that, and have been able to kind of cope with it, luckily, and kind of get through things. And it's weird, you get nostalgic about depression and anxiety sometimes, but but it's been really good. And one of the things I started thinking, it had been like I said, it's been like 3 months, so like coming into the third month, I'm like, damn, I really just have not been thinking at all, like, I don't know, when I started this podcast, when I turned 21, it felt like I was having so many big ideas, or like, realization and perception changes and all these things, getting really hyped up about it and whatnot. And then they kind of just become part of the norm. It's weird. Like, I don't know what it is. You have all these big ideas, and some of them are just realizations that you now see as common sense, like differences between you and older people, perspective changes, getting into the right mindset to do different things, or kind of, it's weird coming off of So I started writing a lot of these ideas. Like I said, it's been 3 months. I've been super high, and I had like a rough weekend, so I was like hungover, for like 2 days. You ever get one of those? But it felt like I was kind of coming back down a little bit, and that made me kind of like realize, I knew I was in a high, but like kind of put the high into perspective a little bit, and to be able to do that is important, I think. But again, it's like, why did I have so many thoughts back in the day that felt so big to me, and I can't have any of that right now? Because I want to be able to that was the whole point of starting this podcast, was to help people relate and like work through some issues that you work through throughout life, especially when you turn 21, and going through that period in your life. So that was a big period, and now that I'm kind of through that, it's like, all right, what have I experienced in these past few years since then that I feel like are relatable and still pretty big realizations? And I mean, that was one of them in itself, is realizing that was a big age, and now, I'm accustomed to these new ideas and perspectives that you're just kind of in them. You don't have to think about them. And I'm very, very fortunate. Of course, I'm so fortunate to have been able to get to a place where I can be happy. I'm expecting, preparing for the worst, whatever that comes, but I don't want to, I got laid off recently about 3 months ago. That's why I was so happy, but, I have a new job too. Don't worry about it. But my dad told me this thing, about the anxiety it was causing me, and then the anxiety, like I was thinking I was going to get laid off and everything. And it was like, why are you worrying about it? Like, you're basically worrying about it twice, because you're worrying about it now and you don't even know if it's going to happen. And then if it actually does happen, then you're going to worry about it again. It's going to be a whole thing. And that's actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about here, was basically when I was high, right? Like, I was in a really good place mentally, and I was going through with all my healthy habits and working out and eating well, but also having a good time, being social, being creative, all these different things. And one of the big thoughts, I'm going to come back to don't worry, I'm going to come back. I got the thread. I'm going to come back to the anxiety and depression thing. But what kind of led me into that idea was that I was been in this high for a little bit, right? And I kind of, luckily, one of the habits that I've instilled has been kind of self-awareness, or just meditation in general, and kind of reflection, and kind of working through just noticing thoughts. That's the biggest thing, is like noticing a thought, and being like, wow, where did that thought come from? Especially if it's kind of out of left field. So like, something for me is like, obviously personally think judgment is bad when you judge other people for doing anything. You know what I mean? Everybody has their own life. Shouldn't judge anybody at all. But I found myself like judging people. It was just kind of a sudden reaction, you know what I mean? And I was like, why did I just like think that? Why was I just so rude to that person in my head? And, it's made me think. It was like judgment is just become harder to control when you've been diligent for a little bit, like I've been in my healthy habits, I've been in a good spot. It's been easy for me to do the things that I consider to be healthy because I've been in this place. When, of course, when you're not in the best mental space, you deserve to indulge a little bit. Obviously, I've done that too, and have that rationalization and everything. So it's easy when you're on in a good spot to be on your high horse. But everybody is a product of their environment, and there's no fault of the individual a lot of the time when people have healthy habits. Not all the time. Don't get me wrong. That's one of the things. It's like, so that was my follow-up thought to this is like, how long can you rationalize unhealthy habits as just living? Either giving yourself, one of the things that I was thinking about in this high when I first started it, right, was, the external world, I went through a whole thing where, I was paying 2 rents with this roommate, and then I went through an emotional thing that it felt like the external world was causing all these emotions, and it was just causing me to like just get crushed, you know what I mean, and get really low. And then I finally got out of that, and one of the thoughts was, if I can just naturally get this low just because of the world, and now I have a little bit of control, is like, I'm gonna let myself get like high, you know what I mean? It's like, when you get in a happy place, it's easy to like go party, right? Or go hang out with friends and being like, wow, I'm kind of dodging some of my responsibilities right now just to have fun. And you know what? That's okay with me. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's okay. If the world can make you this low and get down to the bottom of your, mental capacity, then I think you should be allowed to get yourself as high as you can. Yeah, of course, with some limits, right? You got to be responsible about these things. But that's what the thought is, right? It's like, how long can you rationalize unhealthy habits as living, and having a good time? And part of, it's like, I think everybody should have the right to eat junk food and indulge the vices that, we all have. And especially when we're young, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm 23. I should be allowed to go out on the weekend and drink if I want, you know what I mean? And have a good time and experiment here and there with things, with fun things, nothing specific. But like, when does it become irresponsible? At what point is it a red flag as opposed to just like giving yourself a little leeway? It's like, when does it become a reflection of a deeper issue? And that's something that I don't think I'm going to figure out for a while, but I'm thinking about it now, which I think is good. There's a little bit of self-awareness there that, everybody has to have. So that's something I've been doing, is like, I'm turning 24 next week. And there's been so many times where I come home late and I don't need to eat chicken nuggets and chocolate, but I do. It's like, I'm 23. Fuck it. I'm young. But how long do I get to say that for? How long do I get to do dangerous things? Like, I rock climb pretty carelessly sometimes, or, we climb trees, or even, those are like more kind of physical examples, but there's obviously some dangerous things, like not even hard drugs, but like experimental drugs, or even just new habits and things that you consider that may be vices for some people. The point is like, how much do I get to be like, all right, I'm young, so when else am I going to do this thing? How often am I going to get to stay up until 4 a.m. on a Saturday or something like that, right? And I think you just figure it out when it comes. But the important thing is to keep it in mind, right? Like, again, this is not something I'm going to answer for myself as a 23, 24-year-old. But you don't want to be like 28, 29 and still eating, a shit ton of fast food and be like, I'm in my 20s, and, because there is a point where it's like, humans are creatures of habit. So it's like, you are going to, instill these Terrible habits. I don't know. There's the judgment thing. It's like I can't, I get it. I love nuggets. You know what I mean? What happened? What if I'm 28? I'm going to look back on this as a piece of shit 28-year-old. Like, damn, I was so right. Anyways. The point being, shouldn't think too much about it, right? I think the main issue here is guilt. That is one thing I do want to touch on, right? We all feel it. I started to blame it. I initially wanted to blame it on like growing up Catholic, because God is always watching. Anything bad that you do, you should feel guilty about. I was actually taught, it was crazy, in Sunday school. I went to Sunday school, from 5th to 8th grade, basically. And in one Sunday school, there was this guy. He's like, every little number that you go over the speed limit is another sin. I'm like, are you kidding me, bro? Are you going 5 miles over the speed limit, and that's 5 sins? So there's like kind of an instilled guilt, but I think everybody has that too. You know what I mean? If you have decent parents that try to instill some morals with you, but I mean it's the same way with like productivity, right? It's like every millennial and under thinks. I was just like kind of chillaxing one night. It was raining out. There's some open mics that I could have gone to. My roommate came back and was like, you ever feel like you're just not doing enough? He's like, bro, everybody thinks that all the time. So it's like this productivity thing where it's just this guilt, right? Guilt is funny in the same way that anxiety is, right? I'm bringing it back. Both are overwhelming and controlling, but ultimately they're both moot. Like one can argue that, sure, anxiety can help you prepare for what's coming, right? Two things. Nothing can prepare you for the future at all. I'll tell you that right now. Who knew COVID was coming? You know what I mean? Besides the corporate elite and the 1%. Who knew that? Nobody knew that was coming. And that's what I kind of learned from that period was like, nobody knows. And like anything can happen. So, the real future is, you can build a dream. You can work towards a goal. But the real future is unexpected and unknown. Second thing, you can prepare and plan without anxiety and nerves. These are branches of excitement, I think, but they're based in like fear. Again, kind of a negative emotion. And what about like doing these things, based out of a place of like positivity? When was the last time you referred to, nerves as like this energy, this anxious energy as like butterflies in your stomach? It's a much more positive and useful connotation, in my opinion. So, instead of, I know it's hard, obviously easier said than done, but that's just, again, something that I want to put in, on record to kind of help myself, as well as anybody else listening, is using that energy that you have, that nervous energy, that anxiety, as kind of a motivating factor and something, trying to see if you could change it into something positive. Again, I haven't necessarily done it enough, as much as I would like to myself, but it is something that I think is possible. I used to have panic attacks throughout college, and a lot of the time when I was high. Of course, as it happens, weed does tend to do that sometimes, but one of the things that would happen, panic attacks are from anxiety. And what I did once was, I was just in my own house. I just wanted to chill out, smoke weed, and watch a movie. And I got too high. And I was freaking out. And I just started I was pissed. I was texting. What I did was, sometimes you got to talk yourself through it, right? So I went in my notes app and started texting myself. And I was just what is going on with you right now? Why, what are we doing? And what I kind of when I worked through where it was coming from, it kind of felt like I wasn't being productive with the high. So in that moment, I was like, all right, well then I'm just going to get up and I'm going to start writing, or I'm going to start drawing or painting, or I put that nervous energy into something useful, into something, and it did kind of get me excited about it. I was like, oh, I could do this. I could use this for that, it was a positive thing. I turned it into a great thing. And again, way easier said than done. I haven't been able, I kind of fell out of even, thinking in that manner. And I feel like that's kind of a healthy mechanism to try to instill. And again, it's not. But anyways, I kind of fell out of thinking that way for a little bit because I went through a hard emotional time and I was just trying to figure out life. I was just trying to figure out surviving as opposed to being on the offensive. I was on the defensive. So, that's just kind of something that you realize is that emotions are so powerful. So this is I wanted to bring it back. It's the same way that you feel guilt, right? That's kind of anxiety. I was working through that. Maybe turning that into something positive. It's the same way with feeling guilty. But guilty, anxiety is looking forward. Guilty is looking backwards. Guilt can teach you lessons and help you learn yourself. That's a quote that it seems like is an idea that's out there. I disagree. You can learn yourself and study your actions and the emotions you experienced in them. But that doesn't need to come from guilt. Guilt comes from a kind of a negative place, as I was talking about. That if you want to call it fear, you can call it fear. That one's wrongdoing has exposed something in you that's a hyperbolic, like fatal flaw, and that's a slippery slope. See, I'm reading here, so this is where my cadence comes in. There's a molehill though. When you do something bad, and you feel like that's your fatal flaw, or like that's you as a person, and you're never going to be able to change that, and you feel guilt for that, or people don't change. It's like, how about we turn that sort of negative spiral into reflection from a human understanding. What was the action you did that you considered wrong? Wrong is that's a term that's hard to pin down, right? What emotion were you feeling in the moment? Emotions are often illogical. The emotion you were feeling, did that play a part in the decision you made? And did that incident come out naturally? Were you being you in the moment? Was there anything that you really could have done differently? You can't change the past. Things happen the way that they did. The best you can do is understand the why instead of feeling guilt, right? Understanding mental processes can actually expose advantages in sometimes obvious ways. Like, I was rude to one of my friends, and it was kind of a big thing to me. Emotionally, I was beating myself up over. I was like, why would I say that to them? But it turned out, at least that what I was saying was, so here's the thing. It came from a place of anger, but it also came from a place of honesty. So, one of the advantages that I learned was, again, expose advantages in sometimes obvious ways. So like brutal honesty. It's still honesty, but it's just being expressed in a difficult manner. And so when you look at it like that, it's like, okay, maybe I need to control that emotion a little bit more. And I can still express that feeling and in that honest way that I wanted to, but do it in a more cushiony way, in a way that shows that you're being empathetic, that another person also is experiencing emotion and making their own decisions and working through problems, things like that. It leads to maybe also not so obvious advantages of like self-awareness, looking back in reflection through this, understanding of human emotions, knowing yourself and your flaws well enough to call it out when you see it. Again, that's what I was saying earlier about, just noticing thoughts and like recognizing ideas, and change what you can where you can. Much easier said than done, but I think having these thoughts is kind of the first step to, start instilling a little bit better of habits for you. Something that the late and great, no, he's not late and great, what Kanye would say, everything I'm not makes me everything I am. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, everything I'm not could be, considered flaws, but they also make me everything I am, which has put me in a place where I've been fortunate enough to be happy for 3 months and achieve some things that I've always wanted to achieve. So I think there's a lot that goes into that, obviously. Again, all this started with me thinking that I wasn't thinking enough. And I think ultimately the goal is to live without thinking about it, unabashedly. It's hard to instill, that I think that's one of the main things that people say about me all the time. Is what I recognize in myself is that I'm an overthinker. And that's what has caused a lot of depression and anxiety for me. Now that I've been able to come off of the high a little bit. When I was in the high before, I was just overthinking about, high ideas. That's when I came out with that reflection, what was it, that podcast back in, it was like the gratitude. That's what it was. I was so, I felt like I was so, and, it was good stuff. That's fine. I was doing my thing. But I felt like I was so, I was up on my high horse and I was like speaking poetically and everything. You know, when you're in a high and you feel like everything you say is like poetry. It's like artistic. You know what I mean? Or you're like, wow, everything I'm thinking right now is just like, this is amazing stuff. This needs to be out there. This needs to be heard. Come on, bro. I bet 3 people are going to listen to this podcast. You know what I mean? But, you know, I think, again, it's more for my record. And the thing is, you don't think about it too much, man. Now that I've been able to come down off of the high a little bit, I realized that I wasn't thinking. And that's why one of the reasons I've been so happy for 3 months is that I haven't been fucking thinking. Oh, man. Life is weird. There's this quote from Alan Watts that I wanted to read. Probably wrap it up on this is, a person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts. Good sentiment, along with what I was saying. I like the second part. Doesn't match up as much as I was saying, but I'll just read it. It says, but if you talk all the time, you'll never hear what anybody else has to say, and therefore, all you have to talk about is your own conversation. That's a little lesson that you can, figure out for yourself. But it's been a couple of months. I wanted to end on that quote, but also saying that putting my old anxious and depressed life into perspective with my current happy life, on top of juggling it's juggling life, you know what I mean? It really is juggling, all the hobbies and things that I've gotten myself into while I'm happy. There's different thoughts and ideas that spread out in all directions with those things. But, being able to put that into perspective and the issues and problems that I have with what I consider to be real problems from the external world, from my old unhappy life, it's basically something I've realized is not to call my problems now problems. They're just decisions, especially, again, I think the biggest takeaway is putting into perspective not only your own life, but if you're not on the defense, if you're not just surviving, then everything at that point is decisions. It's not problems. And if you're fortunate enough to get to that point, then I think just being able to realize it is something that you should consider doing. So, it's been a fun couple of months for me. I hope that you have all been able to relate with what I've been saying a little bit. Just trying to spread some positivity and not be made fun of for it. Don't shit on me for this. This is anyways, nobody ever does listen to this. Anyways, it's been a fun couple of months. I hope you all have been able to achieve some sort of happiness in your life or coping mechanisms. One thing I did also want to say was, like I said, you can be nostalgic for some kind of darker periods in your life. I feel like COVID was a dark period for everybody, but also music just hit in a different way from that period. You know what I mean? I still go back to music that I listened to and found in that period. I'm like, dang, remember when this hit for like months, dude? So good. Emotion is a funny thing. You got to be able to recognize it, but also something you can learn from older people is that they feel they're more themselves, which is a good thing, but also they don't feel as much. They wish they felt, I've talked to some older people about the anxiety and things like that. They're like, man, I wish I could feel that excitement or like that energy again. You know what I mean? So being able to put that into perspective as well. Again, one of the darkest periods emotionally that I had was a couple of months ago. But while I was in it, I did recognize, I was like, wow, this is a human feeling. This is a big deal for me in my life. It's hard to appreciate that, but I think it is something you should try to appreciate. Everything's easier said than done. I know nothing. This is personal experience and opinion. Do what you want with this information, but I do appreciate people that did listen and get this far. Hopefully you can relate to it. If you can, always here to talk. I love talking with my friends and family about deep shit. If you know me, obviously that's one of my main things that I love doing. And I try to come off as smarter than I actually am. I'm fucking, you know what I mean? Look at this guy. Look at this. Bald at 23. What are you doing? Anyways. Thank you so much for listening. There is going to be more. I'm trying to do so much here, but also doing nothing at all. But there are going to be some more updates with the podcast. I'm excited to show the new studio space that I'm working with, and got some new ideas for what we're going to be doing moving forward with guests and everything. If you have any ideas, I'm always open to those as well. So Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it. I hope you all have a great week. I love you. Amen. Okay. Bye. Don't think. You're not supposed to think.